Okie dokie, artichoke. Playing around with a few things on here. So, looking to do some sound recording today. We had a nice rainstorm, and I took out this mic. I didn't take it out. I set it right next to the window and opened the window to it, and set it to room sound. So let's hope it doesn't freak out the. So if I do this is what I set it to, and it should get a different type of sound. You should be getting room noise. But when I used Audacity to record the sound, it gave me a whole lot of nothing. So I think it's filtering out the sound, the ambient sound of the rainstorm, even in the open to room sound. So I pulled out my little audio recorder, and that seemed to do pretty good for me. So I think I'll probably just make a habit of carrying that around with me all week and see what sounds I can grab with it. But I was looking at nap time. Is it nap time? Okay, so I was looking to do where is it? Where's my file? No. So that was on desktop. So desktop, I had saved this here. No, that's my desk. No. Come on. You're here somewhere. There we go. So I created a special file just for this week. I figured it makes more sense than what I've been doing. Where I've been like just saving a lot of things in one giant untitled document and expecting that I'll remember which one of the 5 untitled documents it's supposed to be. Nope. So each week I think I'll just start a new document based on what we're doing that week. So looking at the sound effects list, I had my big list that I sort of came up with yesterday, and so doing I don't know where I'm going to get enough people laughing together to mix them to make the canned laughter, but I can do I can do some of these over the next day or so relatively easily. The thing I got caught up in last night was doing a little research on how to use music mixing software. And I wandered back into watching some of Andrew Hong's stuff and how he makes music from sounds that he records. And I've got this mic here. I should be able to get something like that and just shred it into its constituent sounds and use those sounds to do like the hi-hat sounds, the bass tones, and the drum, and then be able to do like melody tones in it. And so I was doing a little research into how to do that on a piano roll. Most people use like an Ableton or something like that. I'm not as familiar with what my options are in LMMS. One of the things that I think will potentially be an issue is like I have access to a piano roll feature, and I think there's a mixer that you can bring up on LMMS. And so I can bring multiple channels and mix them at different volumes together. Not quite familiar how it works yet, so I need to do some dabbling with it. But you can't take apart existing sounds in it. I don't think you can do it in Ableton either. There are extensions or add-ons you can get that let you do that, I think. But theoretically, I should be able to load a sound from my recorder into Audacity, tear it apart, reassemble it, or take pieces of it and use them as instrument sounds for the piano roll. So instead of using the piano sound or a violin sound, like might be a default setting on it, theoretically I could do breaking glass or clapping hands or squeaking door hinges or things like that, and play with those to see what kind of music I can make with it. Now, I may end up just doing some very simple music pieces, maybe even just a simple chord progression, like a 4-panel, a 4-bar chord progression, and changing the rhythm within each note of that. And then for the bass, do a like a complementary single or double tone, like an octave tone, lower on the scale that matches with a key tone from the. I wish I don't have a lot of musical theory in my background. I did a little chorus and band in high school, but I never really learned to do it well. I was always playing by ear with other people, and I was a percussionist and not a musical tone percussionist either. I was the bass drum carrier. So I'm 6'2", and at the time I weighed about 280 pounds. So I could haul around a bass drum just fine. But being able to take a sound and rip it into and drop the pitch and alter the sound enough that I could use it for a kick drum, a snare drum, and a hi-hat. And maybe a tom-tom or a xylophone or something like that. And then have the bass, like an electric bass tones. Those would usually be something you would do sort of with like a single note or an octave gap. So like 2 C's, 2 D's, 2 E's. And then above that is the sort of like the main chunk of the sound that you're going for. The actual scales or chords that you're going to play with, like a chord progression. And there are different chord progressions you can use for different moods. And so picking a good chord progression, picking the right matching tones for the bass. There's also a question of if you want to do a channel above the chord progressions, where it's going to be a matching tone above it. Like it's going to be one of the notes, usually one or so notes of the chord. So like I would basically just figure out what my key is going to be. So basically look for like happy chord progressions or sad chord progressions or confused, etc. And then each key, there's sort of like each key has 7 main chords, and using I'm likely to use the ones that are used most often because there's a reason we favor them more often. And so I think what I'll probably end up doing is snagging probably like there's like 4 Chords of Awesome was a song by Axis of Awesome that they did, and they used the famous chord progression that lets you reproduce pretty much any pop song of the last 50 years. So just doing a chord progression like that in a particular key, to picking one that sets the mood right for different things. So I may play with it to a degree where I can use different moods for, like, if I do a horror movie, I want to be able to do like something intense, while if I'm doing like a happy adventure or something like that, I want it to be an upbeat sound. But if it's overall the same piece, it's just because there's just a couple of famous examples of like a pianist who took a piece of music. It's sort of like a comedy routine, and flipped it from a major scale to a minor scale, and it turned it into a more kind of like a eerie piece. And so, like, being able to take the same tune and just with a little tweak flip its meaning and emotional impact, I think I would want to be able to do that for especially like the background music for my channel. Not that I know where I'm going to really install a lot of this. It's probably going to be very quietly installed in the back of some of my videos, so it's not obscure. Like, these videos are all talking. Like, the edited videos that I do are talking. So there's not going to be a long pause where I'm not doing anything, other than if I get back into doing the sort of showing me trying the thing out. At that point, it's you know, I can use a little background music for that. The intro is where most of the music's going to be for that, though. My other channel, that's going to be more likely to have background music of any significance. Okay, and then once I've got the sort of like the key and the chords and the chord progressions that I want to use, melody mostly is going to be, you know, stay within the notes, the chord of the chord that you're using. So you're going to use one of your 3 to 5 notes within the chord that you used. It's usually a 4-note chord, 3 to 4 notes. And you're doing that above the main tone. And I don't know if it would be like, I'd have to play with it a little bit more, but I'm not sure if you would do it on the same kind of, in the same kind of way that you use the bass, where it's usually just like 4 individual notes, longer single held notes, or a rhythm. You can do a rhythm with the bass notes, because bass is usually a rhythm instrument. But it's sort of like doing you do the drum setup, you do the bass, you do the electric guitar, and then you do like a keyboard over it. Or maybe it's more like flute. Yeah, it's not a really great comparison, but you've got the 4 sets of sound that you want to throw into this. You got the high notes, middle tones, lower tones, and the rhythm. And that's like, everything I've seen so far really sticks a lot to that. There have been a few examples that I'm kind of fond of that are simpler. There's sort of like there are people who do like stomp rhythm music, where it's really just like clapping and stomping, and it just establishes a beat and a rhythm. And that's all there is to it. And that could be interesting to try to do. One of the other ones that I'm aware of and I'm sort of fond of is people make these instruments out of PVC pipes, and you hit them with pieces of foam over the opening of them, and the foam makes a little like a boom noise as it goes over the top of the tube at different tones, and they use them to play. It's almost like a xylophone, but the tone is more distinct than that. And I kind of dig that sound by itself. It doesn't need, yeah, it's sort of like Blue Man Group. There is an instrument that does that in one tone. It's called an udu, U-D-U, I believe. And it's a ceramic pot with an opening at the top, like a regular pot, but a hole on the side. And it's got a texture on the side that you can rub your hand against, and it makes like a sound. And then you can tap the side of the pot with your thumb, and it makes a ringing sound, like not quite a bell, but the ring of a glazed ceramic pot that you hit with an object. It goes ping kind of sound. And then when you take the flat of your hand and you go over the opening on the side, it produces that boom sound. And you can do a set of rhythms by tapping on it, drumming your fingers on the side, rubbing your hand against it, and you can do a sustained tone by hitting that hole right, or you can do a sudden blunt sound where it's more of a boom instead of a ringing tone by going over the hole in a different way. And if you partially block the end of the other hole, you can change some of it. So it's a fun instrument. I've had the chance to play with one on a couple occasions when I was out traveling. But that same tone is such a distinctly unique and interesting sound, and I kind of dig it. I can't believe I just used that phrase, but okay. And then the thing about it is it's usually a very short range of sounds you can make with that one instrument. So you'd need like an entire orchestra of them. But if you could record making that sound once and use audio editing software to change the tone of it, the note that it produces, you might be able to make a whole set of sounds with it, which would be cool. I would totally get into that. But I also feel like it would be fun to build the PVC pipe organ, I guess we can call it, percussion organ. That would be fun to do. There's another instrument that I would love to play with and see what I could do. And it's another weird one. Surprise, surprise. I never do anything simple. But there's an instrument called the daxophone. I always spell this wrong, so I'm going to type it. I'm going to look it up and type it out so that I can explain it better. Okay, so let's see if we can pull it up on the side here. Nope, that's not what I asked you to do. There we go. Daxophone. So yeah, it's D-A-X-O-P-H-O-N-E. I think I spelled that right. Daxophone. It stems from I believe the word for, it was created by a German, and the German word that inspired its origin was the word for badger in German, I believe, because it supposedly, when he first played with it, sounded very similar to like a call of a badger or something like that. That's part of the mythology of it. I don't know if that's the case or not, but basically what this thing is it's a resonating chamber, or like a piezo resonator in a block that you can put a piece of wood and sometimes other materials that you clamp to that block, and you run the bow from a violin over it. And you have another block that you can move over top of it that is sort of like moving your hand over it to shorten the resonance distance on the rod that you're bowing, so that it changes the tone. It's sort of like if you take a ruler and you put it on the edge of a table and you flick the end of it, it makes a tone. if you flick the end of it and move it so it's a shorter distance is hanging off the edge of the table, it's very interesting looking, but it also sounds amazing. There's a YouTube video out there called Daxophone Hans Reichel Boo Boo and His Friends. And it's a recording of music where all the tones pretty much are made with the daxophone. And it's a whole song. It's really amazing. And I would love to play with one of those. So like an oud, a daxophone. There's another one. I kind of like the hand pans or hong drums, which are essentially they look like a giant lentil. They look like a M&M or a Skittle. And in the tops of them are these little dents that have been hammered like the Caribbean steel drums to be a certain shape that retains different notes for each depression that you can tap with your finger. And so when you tap on them, you get different tones, and they build them in sets of sounds that when you hit on them, they have this ringing bell-like, gong-like tone to them that you can play music with. And I've heard some really great ones like that. So that's the hung drums or hand pans, I guess, is another way to look it up. Let me see if I can. Hang drum, Hang. So hang drums, and see if we can get they sort of look like those. And I always thought they were fascinating to see people play them, and they sound really neat. Get you to refocus? Yeah, we'll worry about it later. So, so like the hung drums, the daxophone, the oud, and there are a few others that I was sort of fascinated with and potentially would love to learn how to play and use them. Like, I'm still not good enough with the music, right? But like, I need to learn how to play music better. Why are we not focusing? Can we work on that a little? All right. Well, I guess we're just going to be a jerk about it tonight, I guess. All right. Well, it'll be what it'll be. So the hung drum, daxophone, oud, and a didgeridoo. Like, I feel like that's an assortment of instruments that is truly unusual. But I think it would be so much fun to play with each of them. And there's another one called the water harp, I believe. It's a type of instrument. I did a search for water harp, and it pulled up what they're calling it's a waterphone. Okay, a waterphone is a type of inharmonic acoustic percussion instrument consisting of stainless steel resonator bowl or pan with a cylindrical neck and bronze rods of different lengths and diameters around the rim. And it's a family of what's called the nail harp, where you have solid steel or other type of rods of metal that are of a certain length, so that when you rub a bow over it, like a violin or a cello kind of bow, it resonates inside a resonation chamber, sort of like the daxophone. But with the waterphone, you put water inside of it, and the water twists the tone in such a way that it can sort of sound a little bit like They use them for horror movie soundtracks because they have these haunting little wet, sloshy sounds to them. It's not the sloshing that makes the difference. It's just the movement of the water in it warbles the tone that you get off the. Really, just focus, dude. Can we adjust it here? Being an argumentative little guy tonight, aren't we? There we go. Ha ha! Success. And I'm gonna get up at some point because I need to do something, and it's gonna set it off again. I don't know. I'll unplug it tonight and see if I can get it to work with me a little better. But yeah, I mean, these are all things I'd love to play with. I'm not skilled enough to play them as a full instrument, but if I can get a few set of distinctive tones and tweak the sounds in editing software, I could play with them a little bit better to do what I want to. But these are all experiments. Like, they're not going to solve what I'm working on this week. Like, this week, I'm not doing any music that's going to be so involved and complex. But I do kind of want to try to spend some time this week learning how to do some things that make it easier for me to do this kind of stuff in the future. Because I do want to explore these things. Like, I want to go down to the makerspace and build myself a homemade daxophone. I want to go, I maybe want to see how compactly I can build a PVC percussive organ, I guess we can call it. I don't know if that's the best way to refer to it. And then, you know, I would love to, and like, I kind of want to explore a hurdy-gurdy, but that's just because I find it such a weird instrument that I want to look into. Like the hand-cranked violin, essentially, is what it is. But yeah, I mean, there are some instruments that make some interesting sets of sounds that I think would be fascinating to use to see if I can make music with. And that's sort of like the impetus of trying to explore music more for myself. I've never considered myself a musician. A theremin, there are like different types of theremin. There is like a legitimate theremin that's not cheap or easy to make work. And then there's sort of like, you can build like an Arduino kit theremin. I've thought about playing with that. And actually, to be honest, there was something I was doing the other day that, like, I remember when hooking up powered speakers to an amp, like if you touch the head for the jack that fits in, you get a buzzing tone. And depending on how you touch it, you can get different buzzing tones. And that's definitely one sound sample that I want to play. Oh, right. It's a sound, like when I was looking and talking about doing the Star Wars reimagined stuff, I wanted to do, like, if I want to do all of my sounds from scratch and not use a proprietary sound, like, how would I make the sounds of a blaster? And so it's sort of like, I'm thinking, like, there are certain, like, if you're unwrapping like a box that's been wrapped in shrink wrap, and you pull that plastic, and that plastic tears away, and it goes this sound as you pull it. And if you take that sound and you play with it in a piece of software like Audacity, you can tweak the tones a little bit, make them wetter or drier. You can make them faster, shorter, drop the pitch, raise the pitch. You can play with them a lot and mess with them. And I feel like I should be able to take a sound like that and turn it into a blaster fire. But one of the key sounds in a Star Wars movie is the lightsaber hum. And that hum is something very similar to the hum you get when you play with the jack on the end of a powered speaker. and when you touch it, and it just makes that humming sound. I'm like, that might be it. But it's also, it's a related sound. It's the bridging of like a theremin is essentially doing the same thing, only the theremin is making that accessible over larger antennae. You have 2 antennae, and at least that's my understanding of how they work. And so there's a part of me wonders if there's a simpler way to build a pretty straightforward. It may have to be physically contacted, whereas a theremin is just waving your hand over it. And there's laser harps, which are similar, where it's a laser field that you move your hand through, and it senses how far it's LADAR. It's laser radar. It detects how far away you are from the object by the reflectiveness of the laser back at a sensor, and it converts that into a tonal equivalent. And I feel like if you were to do something similar to like the unjacked speaker, the speaker jack, but you put 2 channels onto antennas, and if you touch the antennas and just move your hands around the antennas, you could potentially change the tone. I don't know if there's a way to do. I mean, that might just be what a theremin is, just more energy flowing into it and a greater field distance. Because I know if I get close to the jack on a speaker without actually touching it, it does sense me there. It picks up and does a little buzz in the background. So I'd be curious to see, like, I'd be curious to see somebody build their own theremin and see what kind of difficulty there is to it. Yes, there is, and actually, I watched a video a couple weeks ago. So there is a Doppler effect that was done. The guys that created a lot of the sounds for Star Wars, one of the things they did was some of the sounds of the lightsaber are made off of some of the old movie projector systems. So the hum of the projector that they used to use to show movies was one of the things that is the hum of the lightsaber. It's part of it. It's not the entirety of it. But the sound... Ooh, we got lag going on. Something happened here. My computer might be freaking out a little bit. But the projectors produced a certain sound. And they recorded that sound to be used as the hum of the lightsaber. And then he used equipment. He took it into a room, took a directional speaker system or something like that, and had it play that sound while he swung it past another microphone, so that you do get a Doppler effect as it goes past. When you swing a lightsaber in the movie, the sound they're using is the sound they recorded from a film projector being played while the device it's being played on is swung past a microphone that they record the sound on. And I'm like, I love that. That is full-on DIY, do-it-yourself, tinkering sound creation. I'm like, that's amazingly beautiful. I do not have an old projector to make the buzzing sound, but I think I can do something else. Oh, there's another thing, like the blaster sound that they used in Star Wars for like when they have the big fights and the stormtroopers are shooting theirs. Those are guy wires for electrical towers. The sound recorder tried a whole bunch of stuff, and it was just recording random sounds at a given point. And he went to a particular tower in California, and he was playing with different guy wires, and many of them have dampeners on them to prevent the wind picking them and moving them in a certain way, playing with them too much. And so they have these, I don't know the specifics of it, but they have these things usually on them. But there was one that didn't, and that was the one that when he was playing with it produced the sound that when he put it into a system and tweaked it a little bit, gave that little pew, 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 pew sound. And he played with that and got the I can't believe I made that sound with my mouth. But he played with that sound and made the sounds of all the blasters in Star Wars. And again, it's just a weird random sound that he collected a sample of. The TIE fighter sound is actually a screaming baby elephant mixed with a few other sounds. And it's just they did actually get to use sample sounds from the sound library of yeah. Yeah, it's just like that's part like I originally intended this entire week to be 5 or 6 days of just making music. I don't know that I'm good enough to really justify trying that, but I got so into the idea of playing with different sounds that I'm like, oh, I got to do some of that. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of sounds out there worth playing with. And I had a thought a while back about when I did the Makerspace tours that I did. Is it like a year, almost 2 years ago at this point? No, it was about a year ago. One of the places I went to was a place in Rhode Island, and they had some guys there that were working on mixing synth music and samples that they spliced and played bits and pieces on their devices. And that set of videos is up. It's not great because they were all playing their stuff at the same time, so my audio wasn't the best. But I had some ideas before meeting them, and that just got even more of my ideas going about the possibility of doing, like, recording different dripping water into pots full of water where you get different tone off of that. Ambiloop for sound effect making. I don't know about Ambiloop. I think we talked about one where there was visualization of sound. So Ambiloop, let's take a look. I might play with something like that for the I might look at that to see if it's something that can help me figure out how to do some of. I think one of the other things I need to try to figure out is how to reproduce old video game noises without recording and copying old video game noises. Because, like, the sound of Pong, where the ball bounces and makes the sounds it makes, I want to be able to reproduce that sound. I want to be able to reproduce, like, the Mario jump sound. And I got to figure out how they made those sounds, because just taking those sounds, I can use those for sound effects during a video like this. So, like, if I rate a video game, do a sort of, like, if it's a bad game or a game that I don't enjoy, I could play the sound of, like, a video game character dying and make it something so it's not a copyrighted sound. It's my own version of those things, but get the same spirit and flavor of sound like that. So I got to figure out how they made those games sounds originally and tweak with that a little bit. But also, I think it would be a lot of fun to take some of those old style video game sounds and use them as instruments to play music with. So, like, a Mario bounce could be like a bass beat that you run through your music, and I think that would be kind of fun to play with too. So there are a lot of things that I like. I'm getting into the idea of and exploring the possibility of playing with sounds like this. I set my big list, my master list of sounds that I'm going to be working on getting versions of this week. So glass breaking, I think I can find a glass bottle somewhere along the road, break it. I can use the glass for something else at another point, but break that glass just to get the sound of breaking glass. It's going to be tricky because you gotta do it close to the microphone, and I don't want to break my mics. Like my sound recorder, that's what I'm probably going to be using for a lot of that. Car screech might be difficult. I wonder if I took bubble wrap and popped a bubble on bubble wrap and then slowed it down, would it be close enough to an explosion? I did say I was thinking of using like cap gun caps and slowing that and dropping the pitch. I could do the wolf whistles and stuff like that relatively easily. I think I was looking at doing a cash register where I could do a mechanical lever action followed by a ping from a bell, I think was what I was looking at. That's doable. It's clack, ting, and that's really all you need. You can change the pitch on some of those tones. A lot of the vocal verbal stuff I might be able to do. I might even be able to catch myself laughing in a couple different ways, splice them together, mix them around a little bit, change the pitches. Like, there's so many sounds that I could play with right now. And like, I'm already looking at my list and going, this is a huge list of sounds. Like, how many of these am I actually going to use? And so again, it's like, I could start recording and saving hundreds of sounds over the next few weeks. But the point should be to get sounds that I can use for a particular function. So the important ones are going to be doing the jingles for my 2 channels, doing the background music for my 2 channels, doing maybe a few simple, like the laughter, the crying, the screaming, breaking glass, record stop. And I think like maybe like swearing, like the Yosemite Sam swearing. Yeah, that's part of the fun of like playing around with sound editing for me, is the possibility of doing sound effects for, like, I could probably do like short slideshows where it's like set up this scene, do a sound track in the background of things happening with maybe a little bit of music, and then switch to the next slide. So I could do little narrative bits like that, and that would be really kind of fun to be able to do the Foley art, which is it was interesting doing the research on Foley, where like you don't even realize it, that in a scene of somebody interacting with somebody else, like sometimes they have to add the sound of fabric moving, like a swish of fabric, because otherwise it feels unnaturally quiet and not realistic to have a scene play out where it's just voices and there's not any of that room noise that happens. And so literally they had to have people create the sounds of the rooms that they're in so it didn't feel weird. And I find that a fascinating aspect of movie and TV programming, that was an actual thing that actually happened where they realized this doesn't feel right. We need like background noise. We need it to sound like a room, like a real room, not like just voices disembodied floating in space with an image of a room in it, because it doesn't sound like it's happening in a room. And that's the thing about the Star Wars creators. One of the things they said was like, the whole world has to have sound to it. It's an aspect of the world that you're in, that it has a sound quality to it. And like just creating all of that from whole different sets of sounds or tools that you have at your disposal, they don't have to be hugely expensive things. But if you really look at it, Star Wars would feel weird, and it would feel like not as good a movie if you didn't have the sound that you have from the movies. There's just a layer of like, they have background noise in Star Wars that they had to create because there wasn't any such thing in the world. But they had to be internally consistent. It's funny because like it's an aspect of world building that you don't think of unless you're into sound. There's just an aspect of the world that like you don't realize how weird it is if there's no sound in your environment until you experience that moment. Like if you ever go outside, I seem to remember once during like a hurricane, like the eye of the storm came and we took a step outside to see the eye of the storm, and it was unnaturally silent. There wasn't the sound of birds or insects that we just were accustomed to hearing, and we don't even notice, but you know it when they're not there. And so like that aspect of world building, like to make the world feel real, you have to be aware of those sounds and make the equivalent for whatever world you're in happen. And so it's like I find that fascinating, and it's a field I'm definitely interested in playing in more. So like I'm looking at my list of sounds that I want to work on, and like for this channel, I can imagine doing, I don't even really need the laughter. I don't think that's an important one. Because like the fake laughter is fun for doing the making fun of a thing that's not really funny. But I don't do a lot of that. But I do think like maybe like a school bell or a end of work whistle, glass breaking, maybe do the explosion so I can go like, that blew my mind, and do the sound effect in the background. That might be kind of fun to do. And hissing, like if you put a wet object on a stovetop, just to be able to say like, oh, this was hot, and be able to get a sound for that. The cash register I'll probably use, and then make like rasum freshen where you're stubborn rubbing in a her. Just be able to put something like that in there. I think other than that, maybe some video game noise sounds, and that's all I would need for this channel, maybe, other than the music and the jingles that I'm going to do. For the other channel, I kind of want to do the clinking metal, sawing, hammering, drilling, maybe fire, and then glass breaking. I should also get a record scratch or a record stop. And then I think that would be enough for these two channels as to what I would normally do. But on top of that, I do kind of want to get some clapping, squeaking, and some simple sounds that I might be able to play with ripping apart and using to make music with. So, I mean, I've got a big list of things I don't need, but I have some things that I could definitely use. So school bell, steam whistle. I'm going to prioritize this list here so I can move it around, get what I really, really, really need organized right. So we got to do that. And I'm not going to stop myself recording things if something happens that's worth catching the sound of. Like I caught the rainstorm tonight, and that was just a really cool rainstorm. And I got a couple sounds of cars driving by in the rainstorm. So I got the sound of a Doppler effect of a car going by on wet roads. And those are two sounds that, like, I don't have an immediate use for, but they're neat sounds to have. So I'll play with those a little bit. So copy that, move that into position. So that's sort of like a better understanding of the list I need. Record stop, possibly a car screech if I can get it figured out. So a car screech is good enough. It's an equivalent of the record scratch. Fire and hissing burner. Hissing burner. Hissing burner and cash register. I might not even bother with the swearing. Well, maybe for roving Jack, if I ever jam my thumb while I'm working on something, I can just play it up a little bit. Sawing, hammering, drilling, clinking metal. The shink of sword draw. I think that's all I need. So that could be, that's about half the list trimmed up a little bit. So those are the priorities. And then if I get those, they should also be decent things for me to play with for ripping apart and getting sounds from. So if I have all of those recorded at some point, that list of sounds that I get, that's plenty to play with and try to make music with. So I'll just try to focus on that set. You know, if I start carrying around my sound recorder with me on a regular basis, I'm probably going to get a bunch of other sounds that are not on this list, but I think are worth having. And then, oh, wow, we're almost at an hour. This seems like it's going to be a productive week of discussions because you're into the audio and the sound stuff. So I think we'll have a lot of fun talking about the experiments. I think tomorrow I should be able to maybe give a try run at using, I don't know that I have my power drill with me. I might have a drill I can use. I don't know if it's noisy enough. I don't know. We'll see how it sounds. I will get a hammer, saw, I will put some nails in a steel can, I think, and I will try to rub some knives against each other. Yeah, isn't it amazing? Like, it's when you find something like that that's just so like, oh, I love that idea. I want to go play with it. Like, I love when something stirs that in me, and like the idea of playing with sounds right now really tickles me. I'm gonna have a blast with doing some of this. I had a blast doing the cooking I did last week. I will admit, I got to the end of the cooking and I was sort of like, I could take a break from this for a little while. But yeah, I think I'll have fun this week with the sounds. I don't know how long I'll keep doing it on a regular basis, but I think it's something I will dabble with regularly. Okay, so we've got, that's going to be a little harder to do. I might be able to do that. I got to pull up my video of the brush fire we did the other day to burn some of the yard scraps. I recorded that on camera, and I'm wondering if the camera mic picked up the sound of the fire enough for it to work. Otherwise, I'm going to have to do some improvisational firework. Explosions. I will go pick up some of those caps from like a toy store or something if I can find some. Record stop and car screech are going to be hard. Glass breaking, I can find a way to do that. Steam whistle is going to be hard. School bell. I feel like there's got to be one somewhere that I could use like that. But those are going to be harder ones. So school bell, steam whistle. Okay, so pull that off. And then record stop, car screech. Fire. Cash register might be a little tricky too, but I'll see what I can do. And some of these might just be assembling things from other sources. So school bell, sword draw. So that one should be one relatively easily. Cash register. Fire might be a little tricky. See if we've got that somewhere here. And I think that's sort of, I could probably have most of this done in the next day or so, if I get everything else in my life to cooperate with me, which never happens. But I'll give it a go, see what we got. And if I do pretty well with it, hopefully I'll be able to get the sound good enough that I'll be able to play them tomorrow for hearing, so you can hear what some of them sound like. We'll see how far I get with that. And then I will see if I can actually play around with Audacity and clip some of those sounds to get some notes that I could potentially use in music. And then dabble with that for some of this week. That's not a bad way to go. All right, so we're coming up on an hour. I think I'm going to call it here for tonight. Do a little more research on how to use LMMS tonight. See if I can figure out some of the tricks that I'll have to try to do in the next few days on it. So I will see you tomorrow, or I will talk to you tomorrow. I don't know that I'll see you, but we shall talk again. Thanks for joining me. Take care of yourselves, and have a good night. There we go. You working? There we go.